Clara stood in the kitchen, stirring her tea absent-mindedly as the morning sun streamed through the window. Her gaze drifted beyond the living room to the neatly trimmed lawn, but her mind was elsewhere. Across the room, Oliver lounged on the couch, flipping through a car magazine, his face calm and unworried. "Oliver," Clara said suddenly, her voice light but tinged with something he couldn't quite place. He looked up from his magazine, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah." Clara hesitated. "Danielle invited me to her son's birthday party this afternoon," she began, her tone breezy, but the words rushed. "It's one of those obligatory things, you know how she is. I thought I'd just swing by, make an appearance, and come back. It's not really your scene, anyway." Oliver nodded slowly, his brow furrowing slightly. Clara's casual tone didn't sit right with him. She was avoiding eye contact, her hands fidgeting as if she needed something to keep them busy. He leaned back into the couch, watching her closely. "You don't want me to come?" he asked. Her laugh was forced, the sound unnatural. "It's a kid's party, Oliver. You'd hate it. Screaming children, parents bragging about their toddlers. It's hardly thrilling." She flashed a quick smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Before he could press further, Clara disappeared into the bedroom to get dressed. Oliver sighed and shook his head. Something was off. He tried to dismiss the gnawing feeling in his gut as paranoia. They'd been together for nearly a decade, their life built on a foundation of stability. Why start doubting her now? But as she emerged a half-hour later, her outfit gave him pause. A soft blue dress hugged her figure just enough to make an impression, her makeup subtly enhancing her features. It wasn't over the top, but it wasn't her usual style for a boring kids' party either. "You look nice," Oliver remarked carefully. Clara's cheeks flushed slightly. "Thanks. I won't be long." She grabbed her bag and hurried to the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. As the door clicked shut behind her, Oliver sat motionless for a moment. Then something in him snapped. Without thinking, he grabbed his car keys and followed her. Oliver parked a safe distance from Danielle's house, his heart pounding in his chest. From his vantage point, he could see clusters of balloons tied to the porch and hear the faint echoes of children's laughter. But Clara was nowhere in sight. Then he spotted her. Clara wasn't mingling with the crowd or greeting Danielle. Instead, she was standing near the edge of the property, her phone in hand, glancing toward the street. A sleek black car pulled up moments later, and a tall man with sharp features stepped out. Clara's expression transformed, her reserved demeanor melting into a warm, radiant smile. Oliver felt his stomach drop. He watched in stunned silence as the man approached her, his hand brushing her arm. The two exchanged a few words, and then Clara did something that shattered Oliver's world. She leaned in, her lips meeting the man's in a kiss that was anything but casual. Pain, rage, and disbelief coursed through Oliver. For a moment, he couldn't move. His feet felt like they were rooted to the ground. But as the man wrapped an arm around Clara's waist, a storm surged within him, and he found himself stepping out of the car. Oliver's footsteps echoed unnaturally loud on the pavement as he approached the black car. His eyes locked on Clara, her back turned to him, entirely unaware of his presence. The man, whoever he was, noticed first. His smile faltered, replaced by a wariness that instantly set Oliver's blood boiling. "Clara," Oliver said, his voice cold and sharp as steel. She spun around, her face draining of color. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Clara's lips parted, but no sound came out. The man stepped back instinctively, his eyes darting between them as if assessing his escape route. "Oliver, I can explain," Clara stammered, her voice trembling. "Explain?" Oliver's laugh was bitter, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. "Go ahead, Clara. Explain what I just saw." The man raised his hands defensively. "Look, man, I didn't know she was—" "Shut up." Oliver's tone was quiet but lethal, his gaze never leaving Clara. "I'm not talking to you." Clara reached for him, but Oliver stepped back, shaking his head. "Don't. Just don't." "It was a mistake," she blurted, her words spilling out in a desperate rush. "It didn't mean anything. I wasn't thinking. A mistake." Oliver's voice rose, the anger bubbling to the surface. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door. A mistake isn't sneaking around and kissing some stranger like your marriage doesn't exist. Clara flinched, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. I didn't mean to hurt you, Oliver. Please, you have to believe me. Believe you? His voice cracked with disbelief. How can I believe anything you say now? You looked me in the eye this morning and lied. You chose this. You chose to destroy us. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but Oliver felt no sympathy. Her regret felt hollow, born from being caught rather than any genuine remorse. The man, still lingering awkwardly nearby, took another step back. Look, I'll just go. Yeah, you do that, Oliver snapped, his glare pinning the stranger in place for a moment longer before he climbed into his car and drove off. As the black car disappeared down the street, silence fell between Oliver and Clara. Her tear-streaked face crumpled as she whispered, Oliver, I love you. This was stupid. Please don't let this ruin everything we've built. He stared at her, his chest heaving. Love, he echoed, his voice filled with disdain. You don't destroy the people you love, Clara. You don't betray them like this. She stepped toward him again, but Oliver held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. Don't follow me, he said firmly. I need to think. And you? You need to decide if the life we built was ever enough for you. Without waiting for her response, Oliver turned and walked away. His footsteps felt heavier with each step, as though the weight of betrayal had latched onto him, dragging him down. Back in his car, Oliver sat gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. His mind replayed the scene over and over. Clara's smile, the kiss, her panicked excuses. The betrayal cut deep. But beneath the pain, something darker began to take root. He wasn't the type to lash out recklessly. No, Oliver had always been calculated, methodical. And now, he would channel every ounce of that into making Clara understand the magnitude of what she'd done. As he drove away from the scene, ideas began to take shape. This wasn't just about ending their marriage or walking away. No, Clara had torn their life apart, and she needed to feel the depth of that devastation. Clara stood frozen in the driveway long after Oliver had driven away. The stillness of the neighborhood seemed to mock her, amplifying the storm raging in her chest. Her heart pounded painfully as the reality of what she'd done settled over her like a suffocating blanket. She had always prided herself on being in control, on keeping the perfect balance between appearances and desires. But today, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Oliver's face, a mask of betrayal and fury, haunted her as she stumbled back to her car. The drive home was a blur. Clara's mind raced, each thought more chaotic than the last. Would Oliver leave her? Could she fix this? Was it even possible to come back from something so damaging? When she arrived home, the silence was deafening. Clara walked into the living room, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. Her eyes darted around, half expecting to find Oliver waiting for her, ready to unleash more of his anger. But the house was empty. Her gaze fell on the coffee table, where a photo of them on their wedding day sat in a delicate silver frame. She picked it up, her hands trembling as tears blurred her vision. They had looked so happy then, so full of promise. Now, that happiness felt like a cruel joke. Across town, Oliver sat in his modest apartment, his suitcase resting in the corner. He had packed it with methodical precision, leaving behind the remnants of a life he no longer recognized. The pain in his chest was sharp, but beneath it was a slow-burning fury, a fire that refused to be extinguished. He stared at the wall, his mind churning with plans. This wasn't just about leaving Clara. It was about making her understand the depth of her betrayal, about teaching her a lesson she would never forget. Oliver reached for his phone and opened a blank document. He began to type, his fingers moving with determination. Each word felt like a small piece of his anguish being released, transformed into the beginnings of a plan. The following days passed in a haze for Clara. She tried to call Oliver, but each attempt went unanswered. Text messages went unread. The house, once filled with his presence, now felt cold and lifeless. Her guilt consumed her, but alongside it was an ache she couldn't ignore, a longing for the stability Oliver had provided. She had made a terrible mistake, one she couldn't take back, but she clung to the hope that he might forgive her. One evening, as she sat alone on the couch, her phone buzzed. Her heart leaped, but it wasn't Oliver. Instead, it was a message from the man she had kissed, Derek. "I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Clara stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. She had no intention of responding. Derek wasn't the solution to her pain. He was the cause of it. Oliver, meanwhile, had been busy. He had begun piecing together a plan that was as calculated as it was ruthless. He didn't want to lash out in anger. He wanted to strike with precision, ensuring Clara felt the weight of her actions. First, he started by gathering evidence. The kiss he had witnessed was burned into his memory, but memories could be dismissed or twisted. Hard evidence, however, was indisputable. He tracked Derek online, discovering more about the man who had disrupted his marriage. Social media revealed Derek's carefully curated life, a glossy facade that Oliver was more than willing to crack open. Next, Oliver began to leverage the connections Clara had always valued. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers, people who had admired her polished image, would soon see another side of her. But he wouldn't stop there. This wasn't just about exposing her infidelity. It was about dismantling the illusion of control she had always held. Clara's phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from her friend Emily. It was a simple message, but it sent a chill down her spine. "We need to talk. I heard something about you and Derek." Panic surged through Clara. How had Emily found out? She hadn't told anyone, and Oliver wouldn't have. Would he? Desperate, Clara called Emily, but the conversation was short and stinging. Rumors were spreading, and Clara could hear the judgment in her friend's voice. Hanging up, Clara realized she was beginning to lose the carefully constructed life she had worked so hard to maintain. And the sinking feeling in her chest told her this was just the beginning. Clara's once thriving social network began to unravel at an alarming pace. Her friends, who had always been eager to include her in plans and share gossip over coffee, became distant. Text messages were ignored. Phone calls went unanswered. And when she ventured out into the neighborhood, the once warm smiles were replaced by cold stares or whispered conversations that stopped the moment she approached. She had no idea how it had spread so quickly. Somehow, Derek's name had become attached to hers in a scandalous narrative that seemed to grow with each retelling. Clara suspected that Oliver had something to do with it, but she couldn't prove it. One evening, she mustered the courage to confront Emily in person. "Emily, I don't know what you've heard, but it's not what you think," Clara began, her voice shaky but firm. Emily crossed her arms, her expression steely. "Not what I think. Clara, people saw you. They saw you with him." Clara's stomach twisted. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. Emily shook her head, disappointment etched on her face. "A mistake doesn't erase the damage, Clara. You hurt Oliver, and you lied to all of us." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but Emily turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk. In his new apartment, Oliver watched the fallout unfold with a mix of satisfaction and detachment. The rumors had been easy to spark, subtle comments to the right people, hints dropped at the right moments. Clara's world was built on appearances, and now those appearances were crumbling. But this wasn't enough. He needed Clara to truly understand the weight of her betrayal. That meant going beyond social humiliation. He needed to strip away the security she had always relied on. Oliver began by targeting the financial stability they had once shared. He contacted their lawyer and began the process of separating their finances. Clara had always relied on his steady income to maintain their lifestyle, and without it, she would feel the strain. He also started building his own case for divorce, gathering evidence of her infidelity. Every step he took was deliberate, ensuring that when the time came, he would emerge unscathed while Clara bore the full brunt of the consequences. Clara sat in her bedroom, staring at the bank statement on her laptop. Her accounts were emptier than she had realized, and the bills were beginning to pile up. Panic clawed at her as she realized she might not be able to afford the life she had taken for granted. She tried calling Oliver again, hoping to reach some kind of understanding, but once again, her call went straight to voicemail. "Oliver, please," she said, her voice trembling as she left yet another message. "I know I hurt you, but I'm begging you to talk to me. Just give me a chance to make things right." But deep down, Clara knew it wasn't just about Oliver anymore. Her life was unraveling on all fronts, and she was powerless to stop it. Oliver listened to Clara's voicemail in silence, his face impassive. Her pleas didn't stir him. They only reinforced his resolve. He decided it was time for the next phase of his plan. Clara needed to feel the full weight of her isolation, and he knew exactly how to achieve it. Oliver arranged a meeting with Derek. The man was easy to find, and Oliver's calm demeanor during their encounter masked the storm beneath the surface. "Derek," Oliver said, his voice measured, "I know you didn't expect this to blow up the way it has. But now you're involved, whether you like it or not." Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I didn't know she was married until—" Oliver held up a hand. "Spare me the excuses. This isn't about you. It's about her. But if you're smart, you'll steer clear of her from now on. Otherwise, I'll make sure you regret it." Derek nodded hastily, his confidence evaporating under Oliver's unyielding gaze. Clara's isolation reached a breaking point when her boss called her into his office. "Clara, there's been some concerning talk circulating," he began, his tone carefully neutral. Her heart sank. "Concerning talk?" He nodded. "I won't go into details, but it's affecting the company's image. For now, I think it's best if you take some time off." Clara stared at him, stunned. "You're suspending me because of rumors?" "It's not personal," he replied, though his eyes betrayed pity. "I hope you understand." When Clara left the office, her knees nearly buckled. Her job had been her last lifeline, and now it was gone. Oliver knew Clara was nearing her breaking point. Her calls had grown more frantic, her messages more desperate. He had achieved what he set out to do. She was alone, vulnerable, and fully aware of the consequences of her actions. But this wasn't just about punishment. It was about closure. And for Oliver, closure meant taking back control of his life. He sent Clara a message, arranging a meeting at a neutral location. When she arrived, her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Oliver," she began, her voice trembling. "Don't," he said sharply. "I'm here to make one thing clear. This is over. You destroyed what we had, and there's no fixing it." Clara's shoulders sagged, her tears falling silently as Oliver stood and walked away without looking back. Clara spent her days in a suffocating routine of regret and loneliness. The once beautiful home felt cavernous and cold, each room echoing with memories of Oliver's presence. She tried reaching out to old friends, but they kept their distance. Her reputation was tarnished, and rebuilding it felt impossible. Desperate, Clara began to reflect on her choices. Not just the affair, but years of selfish decisions and emotional distance. She started writing a letter to Oliver, pouring out her heart and begging for forgiveness. But as the ink dried, she realized the futility of her words. No apology could undo the damage she had caused. Oliver, meanwhile, was thriving. Though the pain of betrayal lingered, he channeled his energy into rebuilding his life. He joined a local running group, started volunteering at a community center, and even began taking night classes in photography, a passion he had long neglected during his marriage. One evening, during a group hike, Oliver met a woman named Sophia. She was intelligent, kind, and unpretentious, everything Clara had pretended to be. Their connection was easy, born out of shared interests and mutual respect. Sophia wasn't a replacement for Clara. She was a reminder of what Oliver deserved, a partnership built on trust and authenticity. One night, Clara received an anonymous envelope containing a series of photos. They were from the party where Oliver had caught her with Derek, images of her betrayal frozen in time. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, her mind spinning. Had Oliver sent them? Was this his way of reminding her of what she had done? The next day, she spotted Oliver at a cafe near his new apartment. He looked at peace, smiling as he sipped coffee and chatted with Sophia. The sight filled Clara with a pang of longing and a wave of jealousy. She wanted to approach him, to plead for another chance, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the look of contentment on his face, a stark contrast to her turmoil. Months later, Oliver and Clara crossed paths at a mutual friend's wedding. Clara had been invited out of courtesy, while Oliver had come as Sophia's guest. Seeing him again, Clara felt the weight of her mistakes all over again. She approached him cautiously during a lull in the festivities. "Oliver," she said softly, "can we talk?" He regarded her with a calm detachment. "I don't think there's much to say, Clara. I need you to know how sorry I am," she began, her voice trembling. "I made the worst mistake of my life, and I'll regret it forever." Oliver nodded slowly. "I believe you're sorry, but that doesn't change what happened." "I've changed," she insisted. "I've been trying to fix myself, to be better. Can't we?" "No, Clara," he interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "What we had is gone. I've moved on, and you need to as well." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "I understand." As Oliver walked away, Clara realized that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It meant accepting the consequences of her actions and finding a way to live with them. Oliver and Sophia continued to build a life together, one rooted in mutual respect and genuine connection. Though his past with Clara remained a scar, it no longer defined him. Clara eventually moved to a smaller town, where she worked to rebuild her life from the ground up. She found a job at a local library and started therapy to confront the flaws that had led to her choices. Though their lives no longer intersected, the lessons they had learned stayed with them. Oliver had discovered his strength and self-worth, while Clara had been forced to face her mistakes and rebuild herself piece by piece. Years later, Oliver sat with Sophia on a quiet beach at sunset. As the waves lapped at the shore, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Life was imperfect, but beautiful. The betrayal he had endured was no longer a source of pain. It was a stepping stone to the life he now cherished. As for Clara, she had found peace in her solitude. She had learned to forgive herself, even if Oliver never truly could. Her life was quieter, simpler, but it was hers. And so, they moved forward, two lives forever changed by the choices of the past, yet unbound by them.